and Roundup, a very toxic mix. And how are they mixed together? There is the global manufacturer of Roundup. Roundup is an extremely toxic chemical that is currently the most used herbicide around the world. The Bayer name is very, very well known. It's been a world leader in pharmaceuticals and in agricultural products for decades. Bayer, we must recall, is the manufacturer of pesticides, including Zyklon-B. Zyklon-B being the pesticide that was used to gas to death millions of Jews in the gas chambers of the Holocaust. Bayer was the manufacturer of Zyklon-B and is now, as I just said, the most used herbicide around the world, manufacturer of Roundup. So Bayer has a lot of influence worldwide, including in California. The Bayer Global Corporation won the court ruling that prevented California from putting Roundup warnings on its products. Warnings that would tell consumers that a chemical herbicide is known to cause cancer, and that herbicide being commonly known as Roundup, and the primary ingredient or a main ingredient being glyphosate. Bayer acquired the Roundup manufacturer Monsanto in 2018. Now, there are over 42,700 plaintiffs just in the United States. 42,700 plaintiffs in the United States against the manufacturer of Roundup. Professor Don Huber noted, when future historians write about our time, they're not going to write about the tons of chemicals that we did or didn't apply. When it comes to glyphosate, they're going to write about our willingness to sacrifice our children and jeopardize our existence while threatening and jeopardizing the very basis of our existence, the sustainability of our agriculture. Professor Don Huber is a retired professor from Purdue University, an expert in plant pathology. And let's examine this quote carefully. Future historians will write about this time in mankind's history. And what are they going to write about? When it comes to glyphosate, which again is the active ingredient in Roundup, they're going to write about our willingness as a society and even a world to sacrifice our own children and jeopardize our own existence while threatening and jeopardizing the very basis of our existence, the sustainability of our agriculture. In other words, if we don't have safe food supply, we don't exist. And why does Professor Huber speak about our children? Because our children are being raised, actually from the time they are in utero, with glyphosate. Glyphosate is in our food. It's in our air. It's in our water supply. Glyphosate is everywhere throughout the world, and in some places much more so than in others. This is why many families around the world are turning to organic products. So glyphosate in our food. It's in the wheat that is desiccated with Roundup. It is in soy protein fillers. GMO, meaning genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms. Tampering with the genetic structure of foods. And we don't know where that leads, do we? Many scientific experts say it leads in catastrophic consequences. Cows are fed genetically modified corn and soy. So our children and we ourselves are eating the products of cows. Potatoes are desiccated with herbicides, including Roundup. There is genetically modified canola oil, high fructose, genetically modified corn syrup appears in many, many products, especially those of children. Let's look at glyphosate and other pesticides, because glyphosate is just one of presumably thousands of different products that would be called pesticides. And pesticide is a broad umbrella category for everything from insecticides, herbicides, to disinfectants, flea collars, etc. Air fresheners, because they all have chemical similarities. Looking from 1990 to 2010, in this chart, we see that the percentage of acres treated with pesticides at the top is right across the screen, almost linear. And at the bottom, we see that all insecticides, and that is a type of pesticide, almost linear. But then we see glyphosate, that category of pesticide being very, very greatly increased from 1990 until 2010, and it appears that that continues. Now, what have the governments of the world done about glyphosate, about Roundup? France has banned Roundup. In fact, France banned Roundup the exact day that the legislation was passed. Germany is banning Roundup. Now that's very interesting because Bayer, which is the same Bayer as the aspirin and the same Bayer as the Zyklon-B and the same Bayer that used heroin as a cough suppressant for children, that same Bayer is a major German-based corporation. But Germany has realized that glyphosate is an extreme danger, not only to humans, but it is an extreme danger to the insect populations. Now, in 2015, the World Health Organization, International Agency for Research on Cancer, determined that glyphosate was a probable carcinogen. Yet we still have it. We still have it in America. Why is it important whether or not Roundup harms insects? Because insects are our pollinators. And without pollination, there is no food. There is no realistic, adequate food supply. Now, what does Bayer say in its own defense? And mind you, Bayer was also the funder of the horrific experiments that were conducted in Auschwitz, especially the experiments on twins, in which pharmaceuticals were injected and forced into the bodies of young children in order to test their effects so that Bayer could market products. What does Bayer have to say? Such a ban would ignore the overwhelming scientific assessments of competent authorities around the world that have determined for more than 40 years that glyphosate can be used safely. Well, I can just tell you, with the thousands and thousands of lawsuits, 42,700 is one of the current figures, that authorities around the world do not believe that glyphosate is safe. In Germany, the full ban will take effect on December 31st, 2023. Beginning next year, it will be prohibited to be used in private parks and gardens. Okay, so individuals are not able to use Roundup. And the first restrictions on its use in farming will be initiated as well. Austria was the first member of the European Union to outlaw glyphosate. Then came the Czech Republic, Italy, the Netherlands, and France. One of the leading experts on glyphosate is Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who is a senior research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A senior research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She shares the discovery that glyphosate could be substituting itself in the place of glycine, with enormous disruptions that can happen in the body, leading to the rise in such chronic conditions as Alzheimer's, autism, and obesity, amongst many, many others, that are going up in frequencies in step, in coordination with the rise of glyphosate's use on core crops, such as especially corn and wheat and soy. Corn, wheat, and soy are in untold numbers of products. So we have some slides from Dr. Stephanie Senath's own PowerPoint showing glyphosate, the elephant in the room. And it is an elephant. It's much, much bigger than that elephant we see. It is the #1 herbicide in use in the United States. People use Roundup all over their yards where their own children and pets are playing. It was developed and patented by Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer. And this development was in the 1970s. There is a huge expansion of GMO, genetically modified corn, soy, cotton, sugar beet, and canola crops that has led to sharp increases in glyphosate usage in the last decade. Here's the central question: is glyphosate non-toxic, as Monsanto argues? Our gut bacteria are definitely affected by glyphosate. Insidious effects of glyphosate accumulate over time. These are cumulative effects of toxins in the body, especially with children. The babies in utero are exposed to glyphosate through what mom is breathing and drinking and ingesting, and through vaccines. Pregnant women are being advised and sometimes essentially forced to have vaccines that are showing traces of glyphosate in them. So even in utero, our young children, our babies are being exposed to glyphosate, and because of their much smaller body mass, the effects, the toxic aspects of glyphosate can be greatly augmented. What does glyphosate do? Some of the biological effects, and there are many, many biological effects. It depletes amino acids, disrupts the gut bacteria, disrupts enzymes, which are involved in many biological functions, depletes important minerals. Those of you who have been learning about the COVID virus know that zinc is largely agreed upon by the experts as an important mineral in combating COVID. So glyphosate depletes zinc, among other minerals. And it affects and depletes very important amino acids, such as serotonin, the deficiency being linked to obesity, autism, Alzheimer's disease, depression, and violent behavior. Melatonin controls sleep and wake cycles, and the depletion of the amino acids can affect virtually every part of our life. It disrupts bile acid production and detoxifying of environmental toxins. Because of the disruptions to the gut or the depletions to the gut bacteria, we see a variety of human digestive system disorders that are affected by glyphosate, including inflammatory bowel disease, colitis, acid reflux, gluten intolerance, celiac disease, leaky gut, and Dr. Seneff believes that glyphosate is a major cause of human digestive system disorders. To recapitulate, we depend on our gut bacteria in many ways. They are very, very, very important. Glyphosate kills good bacteria. A growing problem in hospitals is related to glyphosate. Now, we have seen tremendous growth in genetically modified crops in the last 15 years, tracked by tremendous growth in glyphosate applications. Use of Roundup on corn and soy correlates very strongly with observed increases in diabetes, obesity, autism, kidney failure, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. So here we have some of our very most common and devastating conditions and diseases being linked with Roundup or glyphosate. Another really, really important issue associated with glyphosate is endocrine disruption. Glyphosate caused human hormone-dependent breast cancer cells to proliferate at concentrations of parts per trillion. So a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of glyphosate, parts per trillion. I've never even seen that measure before because they generally say parts per billion or million, not trillion. A tiny, tiny, tiny amount of glyphosate can cause human hormone-dependent breast cancer cells to proliferate. What does that mean? That exposure to glyphosate by females can cause breast cancer cells to proliferate. Glyphosate is a known endocrine disruptor, meaning that it contributes to infertility and birth defects. Again, it causes breast tumor cells to proliferate at minute concentrations of parts per trillion. It causes, in some cases, microcephaly and anencephaly. Extreme deformities of the human fetus. Agricultural workers in Costa Rica and in India experience high rates of kidney failure. And according to Dr. Senef, likely due to application of glyphosate pre-harvest to sugar cane. Kidney failure in the United States is rising dramatically. In summary, we should be very worried about glyphosate in our food and in our water and in the air that we breathe and in our vaccines and in the various pesticides that are used commonly, extremely, throughout this nation and throughout the world. Glyphosate disrupts gut bacteria, depletes essential amino acids and minerals, such as zinc, and interferes with enzymes that have widespread consequences to human health. Glyphosate can explain health problems worldwide, including some of those we are most familiar with because they are so common. So common and inexplicable in terms of how dramatically they have risen. Their prevalence has expanded. Autism is very common today and unheard of decades ago. Diabetes, infertility, very common today. Kidney failure, gluten intolerance, all different kinds of cancers, and more inexplicable, inestimable health problems. According to Dr. Senef, glyphosate needs to be removed from the market, and we need to find the path to sustainable pesticide-free agriculture. Now, each of us can contribute to that effort, and let's go back to the source of Roundup, Bayer. The Bayer Corporation, the same Bayer Corporation that mass produces untold different pharmaceuticals and agricultural products, and that mass produced Zyklon-B, responsible for the gruesome, horrific murders of millions of Jews during the Holocaust in gas chambers. Zyklon-B pellets were pesticides used in Europe at the time, and they were taken and put into holes in the ceilings of the gas chambers, where Jews were stuffed in like sardines packed into a little tiny can. They were stuffed in, they were sealed in, the Zyklon-B pellets vaporized and turned into toxic gases that asphyxiated, choked the Jews to death. And yet, we trust pesticides produced by Bayer to be safe. How can they possibly be safe? And what does Professor Don Huber, retired from Purdue University, say? And I reiterate, when it comes to glyphosate, future historians and the public are going to ask about our willingness as a society and as a world to sacrifice our children and jeopardize our existence to the massive, massive, inestimable use of pesticides like glyphosate, Roundup, threatening and jeopardizing the very existence, our very existence, through the unsustainability of our agriculture with the use of deadly pesticides, particularly glyphosate. Are we willing to sacrifice our children and ourselves, our own existence, for the sake of a product that at least scores of thousands of Americans say has destroyed their health and or their lives? Are we willing to make that sacrifice?